The day began with its usual buzz at the ITV studios, where Lorraine Kelly's show prepared for another star-studded morning. Today's guest was none other than George Clooney, the Hollywood icon known for his charm, intelligence, and political outspokenness. It was meant to be a warm, engaging interview about his new humanitarian documentary, a conversation filled with optimism and grace. Lorraine had interviewed him before and described him as one of her favorite guests, funny, grounded, effortlessly eloquent. But this time, something in the air felt different. The crew sensed it even before the cameras rolled, a quiet tension humming beneath the polite greetings and perfect smiles. George arrived on set with his usual professionalism, impeccably dressed in a gray suit, carrying that relaxed charisma that made him a global symbol of sophistication. Yet behind his calm eyes, there was something heavier, perhaps exhaustion from travel, or the weight of the topics he'd been discussing all week in interviews. Lorraine, ever the consummate host, greeted him warmly backstage. "George, so lovely to have you again," she said brightly. He smiled, shaking her hand. "Good to be here, Lorraine," he replied. But his voice was quieter than usual, measured, almost guarded. When the show went live, everything unfolded smoothly at first. Lorraine introduced him with admiration, calling him a true humanitarian, not just a movie star. The audience applauded enthusiastically. George smiled, offering his trademark charm. They began discussing his latest project, a documentary about global refugee crises and the failures of political systems to protect the vulnerable. His tone was thoughtful and sincere, his words filled with conviction. The audience listened intently, and Lorraine nodded along, clearly moved by his passion. But as the questions turned from art to politics, the tone began to shift. Lorraine, encouraged by the producers to touch on current global issues, asked carefully, "You've always been outspoken, George. Do you ever worry that being political divides your audience?" George chuckled softly. "If the truth divides people, then maybe they weren't together in the first place," he said. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Lorraine smiled. "That's a strong statement," she said. "But don't you think there's value in staying neutral, especially for someone with such influence?" His expression tightened. "Neutrality," he said slowly, "is just comfort for people who don't want to get involved." The audience reacted with a quiet stir. Lorraine, sensing his defensiveness, tried to clarify. "Of course, I mean staying out of conflict, not out of compassion," she said gently. George leaned back slightly, his voice firmer now. "Lorraine, staying out of conflict is a privilege. Some people don't get to choose that. When you see injustice, silence isn't noble, it's convenient." The air in the studio grew heavier. Lorraine nodded, still smiling, but there was a flicker of discomfort in her eyes. "I completely understand," she said. "But surely, celebrities speaking up can sometimes make things worse?" That was when George's demeanor shifted entirely. His charm faded, replaced by a quiet intensity. "Make things worse," he repeated. "You mean caring out loud?" Lorraine blinked. "Not at all," she said quickly, "I just mean that people might feel lectured sometimes." He leaned forward, his eyes sharper now. "Maybe they should feel uncomfortable. Change doesn't come from comfort. I don't do this for applause, Lorraine, I do it because pretending not to see suffering is the worst kind of blindness." The audience was silent, unsure whether to clap or hold their breath. Lorraine, ever the diplomat, tried to ease the tension with a laugh. "You do have a way of making us all think," she said. "But I suppose people also watch your films to escape reality sometimes, don't they?" George gave a small, humorless smile. "Escape is fine," he said, "but not when it turns into denial." Lorraine hesitated. "I think people just need hope, not guilt," she said softly. George's voice dropped lower. "Hope without responsibility is just wishful thinking." A few murmurs rippled through the studio audience. Lorraine's smile stiffened slightly. Determined to regain balance, she shifted gears. "Let's talk about your film again," she said. "It's powerful but also very emotional. Some critics said it was too political. George chuckled, shaking his head. Too political? So telling the truth is political now, he said. If empathy is political, then we're all in trouble. Lorraine interjected gently, but perhaps audiences prefer art that unites rather than divides. He looked at her directly. You can't unite people by avoiding the truth, he said firmly. You unite them by confronting it together. The control room began flashing signals for Lorraine to change topics, but she pressed on, curious. You've mentioned before that media often shapes how people think. Do you think talk shows like mine do more harm than good? She asked. George paused, studying her. It depends, he said carefully. If it's just about smiles and small talk, then maybe it keeps people comfortable instead of curious. The studio grew tense. Lorraine managed a faint laugh. Well, we do try to keep mornings cheerful, she said. People have enough worries already. George nodded slowly. That's the problem. We avoid worry instead of fixing what causes it. Lorraine's tone turned slightly defensive. But surely there's space for lightness too, she said. People need a break from the chaos. George sighed, leaning forward again. Lorraine, people in war zones don't get a break. Children starving in refugee camps don't get a break. Maybe comfort should take a break for once. The room fell completely silent. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Lorraine tried to keep the conversation flowing, her professionalism unshaken. That's a fair point, she said quietly. But do you think audiences can really make a difference? George looked at her with a steady gaze. They can, he said. But they won't if they're always being told everything's fine. It's not fine. And until we start admitting that, these conversations will just be entertainment. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Lorraine attempted to smile, but it came out strained. I think what you're doing is incredible, she said softly. But sometimes optimism can be more persuasive than anger. He tilted his head. I'm not angry, he said. I'm tired of pretending that optimism alone saves anyone. She nodded politely. We appreciate your honesty, she said. But I do think people want to feel hopeful. George gave a small shrug. Hope is earned, not handed out with morning tea, he said. If you want hope, you've got to face the truth first. Lorraine looked momentarily speechless. The control room urgently flashed signals to wrap up. Well, she said at last, it's certainly been a thought-provoking chat. George smiled faintly. That's another way of saying you wish it hadn't been, he said. The audience gasped lightly, unsure if he was teasing or serious. Lorraine, ever composed, replied softly, not at all, George. You're always welcome here. He nodded slowly, unclipping his microphone. Maybe not after this, he said dryly. Lorraine blinked. What do you mean? He stood up, adjusting his jacket. You wanted a conversation, not a confession, he said. But the truth isn't something you can manage in segments. Lorraine reached out a hand, her voice calm. Please, sit down, we still have a few minutes. He smiled politely but shook his head. I've said what matters. The cameras caught every second as he turned toward the exit. The audience, unsure whether it was staged or real, erupted in nervous whispers. Lorraine remained seated, her expression a mixture of shock and poise. Well, she said after a long pause, that was unexpected. The producers cut to commercial immediately, leaving viewers stunned. When the show returned, Lorraine maintained her usual grace. Live television can surprise us sometimes, she said with a warm smile. We thank George for joining us and for sharing his powerful thoughts. But online, the moment exploded. Within minutes, clips of the exchange dominated social media. Some viewers applauded George's passion, calling him brave for speaking truth to comfort. Others accused him of arrogance, of lecturing rather than conversing. Lorraine's calm handling of the situation earned her praise, while pundits debated whether celebrities should use daytime shows for serious issues.